Big question that I get is about the IRS, the ERS. We're going to get into that in earnest in a second. But I want to start with this. Saudi Arabia is suddenly going to inject $600 billion. We got big companies suddenly saying, we're going to leave Mexico and go and manufacture stuff in the United States. Got a big Japanese firm that made a big announcement with then President-elect Trump, now President Trump, hundreds of millions of dollars in new investment. Vance, this isn't just coincidence. Why is this happening?
Joe, this is happening because of the new administration and one who is willing to work and talk with other groups, but also carries a big stick. So Trump, he talks softly, maybe a little bit, but he carries a big stick, whether it be tariffs or other things. And I think this show of strength indicates to other countries, you know what, we need to start playing ball with America. America is the lifeblood of the global economy. If we want to do well and prosper, we've got to work with America and work with Trump. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing right now, Joe.
Well, yeah, Vance, I agree with all of that, obviously. But I wonder, what is it about his deal making that works so well and so fast? And let me give you a couple of details. Joe Biden had the same leverage that Donald Trump has, yet he couldn't get anything done, and we were used and abused by all of our trade partners. What is it that Trump is using as the leverage or the threat, if you will, that's making these companies line up and these countries line up and going, yeah, we're going to do whatever you want because we want to play ball here? What is he doing specifically? Is there something?
Well, I mean, it's a couple of things. One, you could argue it's from the tariffs in certain places, but he's not saying tariffs on everyone. I mean, there are these block, tariffs across for everyone, but I don't think that's doing it, right? I think it's more about the military threat. It's more about the pressure that they would get from other avenues, mainly through economic means, because you want to be a part of the economy in America. When you see these big deals like in AI generation of $500 billion in Texas, and you want to be a part of that. You want to be a part of the growth that's happening. I think that is really what's doing it, along with the diplomacy. I don't think that the Biden administration was actually talking to a lot of these folks. I mean, I don't even know what they were doing, to be honest with you, but they weren't talking to them. And now we're starting to see more of the talk, more efforts going on, and now we're starting to see the results of that. So I think there's a combination of factors that's going in this direction, Joe.
Is it a matter? It's Vance Ginn, by the way, vanceginn.com. Follow him over on social media, too. Vance Ginn, Ph.D., former chief economist for the Trump White House in the first term. Is it about a different mindset, a different ideology, in that whoever was running the White House under Biden, you and I would agree it wasn't him, but somebody was. It was more of a globalist, sort of no borders economy, whereas Trump says, we're exceptional. And if you're smart, you're going to want to work with us, but you're going to make sure that it benefits the United States. Is it going from this socialist all for one for all to America rocks, you better get on board?
I think so. I think that's what this is about. Is like we're going to start playing we're going to play the band. Are you going to join the band or not? I think that's what we're starting to see more of that happening across the globe. I mean, you got OPEC and Saudi Arabia wanting to put more money into it. And I think another big part of this, Joe, is that the Biden administration, I don't think was interested really in stopping the wars in Ukraine and Russia and Israel and Hamas. Whereas Trump administration's coming in with a different dynamic to say, you know what, we don't need to be at wars. Trump, for whether people want to like him or not, does not like war. During those first 4 years, there was no big wars that came up. I mean, I think that is huge. And so if you start to see that positioning, that messaging back in the White House, you want to get on board with that.
Economically speaking, historically, war does help the economy. I don't think, certainly I know that Ukraine, Russia has not helped our economy because we sent $200 billion worth of stuff and money over there. That didn't help us. But continuing wars and keeping them going, investing in both Hamas and in Israel, I think the old mindset is that's going to help the American economy. But it didn't help it. Why not?
Well, this is the broken window fallacy of Bastiat back in the day, is if you see the wars going on, you see the amount of spending, but the unseen is really what we miss. And there's a lot of deaths, there's a lot of destruction. That is not a form of economic growth. And so I think what we see now is to say, you know what, let's not go to war to grow an economy. Let's grow internally by cutting taxes, cutting regulations, cutting other things that's going to grow the economy instead of military wars or other things that are out there. And that's a whole different approach from what we've seen in the past. Even in the Republican Party, I mean, I think Trump has been able to shake this up and say, you know what, the military complex isn't the way to grow an economy. We need it. It's important for defense, but it's not the way to grow an economy. The way to grow an economy is the American people.
It's Vance Ginn. Always appreciate the time and the knowledge. Former chief economist for the Trump White House. Is there a way, like if you get a call, you might get the call, but if you're asked, hey, Vance, show us how to start cutting into the debt right now. The deficit obviously has to be addressed, but we're talking about $1 trillion a year just in interest. Is there a way to start cutting the actual debt? Can we see that number start going down? Trump couldn't cut back spending the first time because of the pandemic. Obviously, we had to change spending. But when it comes to peacetime now, no pandemic now, and an economic outlook that's so much different and better than Biden, can we see that number start going down on the debt?
Yes. And I think the first way to do that is through economic growth. I mean, a big part of that is from this new energy going into the AI sector. I think that's going to be huge. I just published a paper with Net Choice talking about the benefits of technology and AI and how it's $450 billion plus per year. And we're going to increase that even more tremendously here soon in millions of workers across the economy. So you have more economic growth. That brings in more revenue. And I think the other side of this is we've got to start cutting wasteful spending throughout the government. And also looking at providing more efficiency where we can, and looking at key reforms. And so I think by using some of the executive orders and rescinding some of the bad spending policies of the Biden administration, in particular the Inflation Reduction Act, which did nothing but increase inflation, not reduce it, I think that's a great way to go to be able to get more growth and more revenue, and then allow for cutting spending, which is the main driver of our debt. Though that combination will be able to drive down the deficits and debt and get us hopefully to balanced budget one of these days. That's been over 20 years.
Yeah, no, that would be amazing. It is Vance Ginn, PhD. Vance, when I do my radio show or if I do a live video on one of these platforms, there's one chief question that's always asked of me. Can Trump and will Trump get rid of the IRS? I know that he's mentioned the external revenue service. We now have the internal revenue service. Can you just do me a favor and give me an explainer that I can use on my show for those who are watching and listening right now, and then later on social media? What exactly would an ERS do, and would that do away with the IRS?
So the ERS, external revenue service, is basically bringing in those tariffs, the tax revenue from tariffs. So it's kind of thinking about it externally versus the internal revenue service, which is collecting income taxes and other types of taxes across the country. I don't know that could replace the IRS. You know, a good way, Joe, to really replace the IRS is moving to a flat income tax that we can do on a postcard and make it very simple and just get rid of a lot of the loopholes and credits and deductions and just make this simple. This is how much you pay. The other way to do it is to go to a consumption tax and get off of income taxes entirely. That's probably a bigger hill to climb, or it is a bigger hill to climb. But by making the tax code more simple, we don't need an IRS. And I think that should be the direction that we should go.
It is Vance Ginn, PhD. I love your answer there. When Steve Forbes ran for president in 2000, he was running on a flat tax platform, which was 17%. Is that enough? What would the number be, do you think, as an economist? Would it be 17, 20? And for those watching and listening, this would be everybody pays the same tax rate.
Yeah, everybody pays the same tax rate. And I think it depends, Joe, right? If we're going to spend as much as we are now, that tax rate's going to have to be higher. I think we need to be focused on, like we said earlier, cutting spending and having more economic growth. And then the tax rate doesn't need to be as high. And also, we got to remember the incentive effects. The higher that the income tax rate is across everyone, the less incentive there is to work and save and invest and grow the economy. So we want to leave it as low as possible. That way you also get the boom of dynamic economic activity that can happen across the economy as well.
Let's talk about a consumption tax. This is a very good tax plan, although there are some caveats that can make government take advantage of us. But basically, it would be this. The consumption tax, let's say it's 23%. That means every time you buy something, you pay 23%. If you're a drug dealer and don't claim taxes, your income tax, you're still going to pay 23%. If you're somebody who makes a bunch of money and you're buying luxury items, you're going to pay 23% of that luxury item that the poorer or lower income people can't pay. The very poor, I think by the fair tax, would get something like a stipend every month, so they wouldn't be suffering, and groceries would not be included in a consumption tax. It seems to be much more fair to me that everybody, even if they're like working off the books, and they shouldn't be, but a lot of people are, and they're doing cash deals, when you buy something, you're going to pay into the tax revenue that the rest of us are paying into. What is the downside, do you think, of a consumption tax?
Well, I agree with everything you just said, Joe. You're right on, and I'm in favor of a national sales tax. I think it's got a lot of hurdles to jump with the 16th Amendment, and we go have an income tax. But look, the states that don't have an income tax, like Texas, where I live, and 8 other states, they do really well with just a sales tax. They have a franchise tax and some other things, but the dominant income source or revenue source for them comes from sales taxes. And so it can be done. It's just a matter of, can we get our fiscal house in order and spending too much? And what other hurdles can we have? I think the other big downsides are the regressive nature of a sales tax.
Yes.
But look, the way that the income taxes distort incentives, especially for the lower income and everyone across the economy, it really acts as a regressive tax as well. So I would like for us to get there. I think it's a high hurdle politically, but I would rather us move in that direction than raising any other taxes.
Well, I can agree with you more. The one downside I've also heard about a consumption tax is individual states would have to be handcuffed to not add a value-added tax, a VAT or something like that. So if there's a national consumption or national sales tax, we would have to restrict states from being able to add to that. Like California, Illinois, New Jersey, New York, they would love to add on top of that and make all sorts of tax revenue, whereas places like you just mentioned, you and I both live in Texas or in Florida or in other states that don't have a state income tax, they would benefit greatly. So how would we handcuff them, do you think, to stop them from taking advantage? Okay, you've got a national sales tax. We're going to add our Illinois sales tax on top of that.
Well, I mean, you could cap it. You could cap it and say you can't be above 30% collectively, or you say, well, you can't increase it at all. I mean, just in Texas, let's say that we're both in Texas. If you have a 23% federal income tax, you add the 8.25% state and local, you're already up to 31, right? 31.25%. So there is an amount that there's going to be, but I get your point. We don't want it to go up to 40 to 50% for these big progressive government spending states. And so I do think maybe there's a cap to how much it can be federal, state, and local, all that together.
Well, I think that would benefit places like L.A. and New York. In New York, if you work in New York, you're paying 60 to 70%, and that doesn't make any sense. People are leaving New York and coming to Texas and coming to Florida, which makes a lot of sense. It's Vance Ginn, PhD. Go follow him, Vance Ginn, over on VanceGinn.com on the internet, and also go and follow him it's Vance Ginn over on X, is it not?
That's right. Simple.
Okay. Go and follow him there as well. Let me ask you about you and I talked about taxes and tariffs last time. I got the feeling that you aren't as hot on tariffs as maybe I am. I'm not hot on them because I want China to pay or I want fill in the blank to pay. I'm high on them because I think it forces companies to come and manufacture here. I think it forces companies to hire Americans. Is that the good byproduct from tariffs, that it would force manufacturing, jobs, and building things? Because right now we're a service economy, which isn't working. It has to be a product economy, does it not?
Well, I agree with your intentions of where you want to go, but what I've seen the results over time has been that hasn't been the case. Even when we had the tariffs on China, it's not like we started producing more here. We just shifted it around to Taiwan, and maybe that's what we want. We want to shift things out of China to other countries, but it doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to have more manufacturing jobs here in America. One thing, Joe, that I think we should make sure we understand is that economic output from manufacturing in America is at record highs. It's just that the employment has fallen down over time. And a lot of that has to go back to the states that you were mentioning earlier, is that we had high union costs. We had high taxes in Illinois and the Rust Belt and other places. And they moved a lot to the south, the Sun Belt, like in Texas. I think we should be doing more of that. I think the focus should be on cutting government spending, cutting corporate income taxes, cutting regulations, and reducing the cost of doing business at home, and then providing free trade agreements with our allies. That would provide much more pressure on China and other countries that don't like us very much, and it would allow for us to have more manufacturing jobs over time, if that's really where we're going to go. Because the other thing, Joe, is that we have a lot of automation. Do we roll back automation and not move in those directions? So there's a lot of trade-offs that happen within that policy area.
When you were working with President Trump, I remember that he originally said, for every new regulation, you get rid of 2. Then he said, for every new regulation, get rid of 4. This time around, he says, with every new regulation, get rid of 10 regulations. What will the impact on the economy be?
Huge. I mean, as Trump would say, it'd be huge. And so I think what we would see is, and we actually ended up having, for every one new regulation, there were 5 that were cut.
Okay,
And
good.
so moving to 10 would double that, and I just think it would unleash the American economy. I think the regulatory state has been terrible. President Biden, through their executive actions, they raised regulations, the final cost of them, by $1.8 trillion over his
Wow.
4 years. That's a hidden tax on all of us. No wonder prices are up and everything else going on across the economy. And so if we can start to unleash that, and I think President Trump, or I know he has done that just in the first couple of days, we will already start to see more of an economic juggernaut through more investment, more job creation, and everything else. And so I think there's a lot of opportunity just by deregulation through these executive orders, which I hope one day, Joe, that we will move away from a lot of the executive orders.
Yes.
Because, and have Congress actually do its job. Because if you move from one president who we like to a president that we don't, that's not good on the economy,
right,
it makes a lot of uncertainty for businesses. And businesses don't like uncertainty when you think about profitability and everything else. But for the time being, this is what we got to do, because the Biden administration had just overregulated our entire economy.
Well, he's got the House, he's got the Senate, he's got the Supreme Court. He should be able to do this legislatively. Smart to do executive orders now, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's got to be codified in law. It's Vance Ginn. Go follow him, vanceginn.com. Last question. President Trump talks about Mexico and Canada taking advantage of us a lot. Canada more so than Mexico. Can you tell us what they're doing and what they've been doing? This deficit with Canada makes no sense. Canada is safe because they exist near us. Nobody would ever mess with Canada because we're the big brother that will take them out. So Canada should be more of a fair player with us economically. What are they doing right now, and what changes need to be made?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we need to look at with Canada is to figure out what are they doing, and what they have been doing is they've been raising taxes and regulations and going the socialist route for a long time,
right?
And that has pushed out businesses and jobs to other places. At the same time, we're importing, they're exporting a lot to us. And so I think you see this dynamic, whether it's Canada or Mexico or Japan or China,
right.
There's a lot that we need to be doing internally to reduce the cost of doing business here, instead of, in my view, kind of blaming other countries. What can we do? And this is what I would talk a lot about with the president and others on staff is, let's make sure we're continuing to find ways to unleash the American economy, whether it's technology or other places. And it seems like that's the steps that they're going for now. I'm hoping to continue to advise them where I can. I don't know if I'll be going back to D.C. or not, but I think that there's a lot of great opportunity from the Trump administration to deal with things like, Canada. The Panama Canal is going to be a big one. There's
Yes.
a lot of trade that happens there, and I'm glad that they're focused on that. Well, it'll be interesting to see what happens there as well.
Always amazing information with Vance Ginn. Go follow him, vanceginn.com, at Vance Ginn over, and it's Ginn, Vance Ginn over on X. Man, great information, and thank you for clearing a lot of things up. I think people are going to get a lot out of this. Vance, thank you.
Thank you, Joe. Have a great day.
All right, brother, you too. We're back after this. Stay right here.